One of the longest standing One Piece theories is the man in the eye patch, which is funny given that I, as a still somewhat newer One Piece fan, but have gone through the whole series, didn't even know about. Having been appraised of it and seeing where the manga is currently going, I think we know who the man in the eye patch might be, and while some people have said who it is, I don't think we ever knew why he would end up with it. But this will change the series for multiple reasons if I'm correct. So let's go ahead and subscribe to the channel and like the video so we can get this out to more One Piece fans. So I'm going to go ahead and just preface this with the end line statement of that, which is that Luffy will be the man with the eye patch, but not for the reasons that you think. Most people assume that the reason Luffy will end up with an eye patch is because he's, always been destined to lose an eye, dating back to, the original series with Romance Dawn, with him nearly stabbing himself in the eye, as well as the fact that it is something that Oda has wanted to draw for a long time. He's talked about drawing a character with an eye patch, and it's a symbol of plot progression. And I think that all of this is true. It, is also true that Luffy has looked more and more like a pirate as he's gone on. But now that we're in Elbaf, there's some very unique factors that are determining why Luffy will end up with the eye patch, and it's worth sticking around for them. Look, the best way I'm going to describe this is simply due to how One Piece is constructed, what roles other characters fulfill, and basically where Luffy is now. Luffy is currently working on becoming friends with Loki. I mean, I know that's not necessarily how it was originally framed, but that's kind of where we're at. Whether Loki will actually become his friend or not is not yet determined, but we're already kind of setting the cornerstone of that relationship. But it's worth noting that Luffy is already kind of friends with another Loki as well, which is basically Usopp. All of the Straw Hats have multiple inspirations, both mythological, fairy tale, and historical. The mythological one for Usopp could very well be viewed as Loki, as he was a notorious liar that often aided the gods and ended up piloting a ship filled with thousands of souls for Ragnarok, which sounds an awful lot like what Usopp did by gathering the Straw Hat Grand Fleet, but let's go ahead and loop back to that in a different video. In this instance, let's just say that I believe that Usopp could be characterized as Loki, and so if therefore Luffy's relationship with him can be characterized as very unique, because the person who was best friends with Loki and had a strong relationship with him in Norse mythology was not Thor, as many Marvel fans believe, but instead Odin. And Odin isn't really as he's depicted in either Marvel or even most other films. Odin was really more of a trickster god. He essentially would go around, he could deceive people, he was very smart, he did have combat ability, but it wasn't his forte. He also seemed very happy-go-lucky and did enjoy making people laugh and party, which honestly sounds very Luffy as well. Why do I bring this up? Because it's very essential in pointing out that Luffy will lose his eye to gain his next power-up, the same way that Odin lost his eye to gain knowledge. In both Marvel and mythology, Odin ends up losing his eye in order to better understand the world. He gives up that eye for power and knowledge. It also ties in with him basically hanging himself from Yggdrasil for a total of like 9 days in order to gain power, 9 being a very prominent number in Norse mythology. But this also ties around with the idea that if that's true, we have a giant tree related to, Viking culture with the giant, and we have Luffy teetering on the verge of unlocking his next real power-up with, the special hockey that can hurt Celestial Knight, and now Emu showing up to really show Luffy the benchmark he needs to be able to hit, which, by the way, I do think that with the sudden arrival of Emu, this is probably not their full power. I think that even right now, Emu is still being restricted by being through another vessel, and therefore, we're not witnessing the full capabilities. This is just to give Luffy a taste of what we can expect at the end of the series. So how does this go? Well, it more than likely happens that Luffy will show up at some point in the manga to save his friends, as we've kind of predicted he's going to be doing before, but I do get the feeling he's going to suffer quite badly in this fight because he's not going to have the necessary abilities to actually do anything. That being said, I do think there will be some tie around, possibly with that ancient lab that was found, possibly with other things that will enable them to at least shove Emu off. It's also possible that they might run out of time to be able to possess somebody, as this doesn't seem to be an ability that they can use easily, and other factors in the Holy Land might draw them away, which might be a saving grace for the Straw Hats right now. Either way, Luffy will essentially have to undergo a sense of training and basically exchange to gain this power, and that's more than likely where he will lose the eye, but probably gain something extremely powerful in return. And honestly, it might be more than just hockey. It might have something to do with Gear 6, it might have to do with another application of his fruit, but it can make a big difference. Now, the only caveat against this is that a lot of people point out Luffy has an age drawn for age 40 and age 60, and he doesn't have an eye patch. It's also worth noting that, like with all the Straw Hats, that was labeled as the good timeline, and it's worth noting that we don't actually know if we're in the good timeline or just a timeline for One Piece. I would assume it's the good timeline, but we also don't know necessarily how accurate that was for Luffy. But what do you think? Does he actually going to get an eye patch? Is it going to be related to Elbaf and Norse mythology? Leave your thoughts down below, and go ahead and like the video and subscribe to the channel.